Welcome, everybody, and I'm delighted to be with Anthony Richardson today. Thanks for joining me, Ant.
Hi, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Um, Today, the topic that Ant has chosen to cover is the AI questions that leaders are struggling with. And I'd like to start by saying, of course, this is an enormous topic, and
Mm,
there are more than 15 minutes of questions. So we're starting with four today. Watch out with there may be a part two, possibly a part three, and onwards for this. But Ant, help us understand. We've chosen four questions to cover today. How
yep.
did you get to that point, at least, to start with those four?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, one of the things that we do as a matter of design when we're delivering AI for leaders is we actually start with getting leaders to tell us what their concerns are. We've done this across quite a lot of different organizations now, and we've got a good long list to go and look back at. But there are some common themes. There are some, you would imagine, there's that, the 80-20 rule, those ones that always seem to come up. And so I thought, having a look back at those, real questions we've been getting from leaders, let's surface those three or four things, have a little discussion about them, and maybe give people some useful insights.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you. So we're going to start with talking about if I'm a leader of an organisation, so should I be planning to give everyone a license to AI?
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the first really practical questions that comes up. Um, well, everyone, let's say we're a Microsoft organization. Well, everybody can use Copilot, but there's this option to pay for this. It's not a huge cost, and it changes. I won't quote it because probably have changed by the time someone goes and looks at it, but it's a small cost. But there's this question of, do we give this license to everyone? Um, and I think a lot of leaders fear, and many leaders we've talked to have seen, so it's a real fear, that if you just do that in isolation, you actually don't get much of a return. You don't really get any noticeable return. So there is actually more to it than just sort of turning the license on. A couple of useful insights, though, I think that we always give is, first of all, what does this typically do? And actually, you know, you can do 99% of what you're looking to do without using these additional licenses. For most people, most of the time, they want help with an email. They want help maybe generating some insights from a spreadsheet. You don't really need to pay for any advanced functions. But, when we start getting to the point where wanting to start building agents and sharing them with a team and really start pushing this to the next level. And ironically, this is where the real benefits start to hit. Well, that's where we'd want that license. So
Mm,
you can see the simple answer emerging, Suze, which most leaders take away, which is, we should be challenging our people to get the most out of this tool, to show us, to demonstrate, and to bring to us these opportunities for things that require the license. And actually, when you look at the license cost, we had a laugh about this with some leaders at one organization actually just before Christmas. When you look at it, you only have to save, I think it's like 50 minutes a month for most members of staff when you look at the cost. Just 50 minutes of saving. That's just using it, you know, five
yes.
times a month, saving 10 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
And you can see that that would be viable.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you.
Hmm.
Um, the next question just somewhat alluded to as you were talking just then is, how do we know which tool people should be using?
Yeah, yeah, and it comes in two flavors because, well, first you've got the question of, okay, so again, let's say we're a Copilot organization or a Gemini organization. We're using Gemini as an organization. That's brilliant. How do people gain the knowledge to know what these individual tools within Gemini even are? How do we get that? I'm seeing things like there's a canvas and there's this notebook feature. How do people gain knowledge about that? How do they find ways to use them in the job? But then the second one is, it seems like there are other tools out there. Should we be considering those too? Um, the thing with AI is most of these tools that we're using in our different organizations are actually doing the same thing again 99% of the time. um, Again, this is a question of specialization, and if you're struggling with that question as a leadership team, it would probably be, we'll start with what you have, start with that core tool that you're using, your Copilot, your Gemini, but explore as well. There are specific situations, and there's two in particular I'll cover that I think are useful insights for where actually no, it's probably better to use a different model. One specifically are those colleagues we have, and we all have them pretty much in all of our organizations, who look after our technology. Um, those colleagues who are writing small amounts of code and formulas and things in the organization. Um, there are models that specialize in that. There are online AI services. And, speaking as someone who does a bit of coding from the armchair myself, there's a bit of a temptation if you're not given the access to use some of these tools online to just use them. And that can bring all sorts of data concerns. So again, to avoid those grey markets, actually, I would encourage leaders to be proactive and actually work with those technical colleagues to identify those specialized types of AI. Outside of that, though, it's stick with what you've got as your core solution and explore on a case by case basis.
Okay, fabulous. Um, will our data leak? In other words, are we safe and secure in our data and
Yeah.
how we use it with AI?
Yeah, well, we just hinted at that, didn't we? Saying, well, if our technical colleagues go and use some of these free online tools to do their work, are they then passing information, or are we getting code from this external? Well, what are these risks? Um, Most people do have a fear, and this is just leaders. This is just human beings with this fear. When I'm talking to this thing, is it learning? Is it learning about me somewhere in its soul? And might if I express something here, and then you're talking to it over there, might it leak something out that I spoke to the AI about? And the answer is no. This is something we cover a lot in our practitioner course if people are interested in technical details. But the short answer is no, the AI tools we're using right now are not actively learning as they're going. And we're all fairly safe from that. Most of the sensations that we get of where it seems like the AI has remembered something about us, that's actually fairly secure, and it's mostly a bit of a trick. It's some smoke and mirrors to help us engage better with the AIs and for them to be more useful, for them to have this almost pretend memory.
Mm.
Um, but that's not to say that things won't change over time. But for right now, actually, that's probably one of the most areas of overcaution that I do see, particularly among leaders, is it feels like we're going to leak. We should just really not tell anyone to use this. And I think we can probably relax a little.
Okay, interesting, good. And then the fourth question is
Mm,
around, will my people become too dependent on it?
mm. And I think this is one of the ones where we would say to leaders, yeah, there's a very valid concern here. And in fact, I'll be as bold as to give a very blunt answer. Left unchecked, yes,
Mm.
it's already happening. There is scientific research from multiple establishments. The one I'm most familiar with was well, actually run by Carnegie Mellon University, and it found a demonstrable already decline in heavy users that was studied of AI, in terms of their ability to do creativity, problem solving, data analysis, things that are really crucial to just being competent in general. So that's the slightly longer answer, but I do go back to the short answer. Yes, it's one of the main things that I think leaders should be building a proactive strategy for now is yes, encouraging use and getting the benefits, but challenging people to do more with the technology, not to relax and have the robots start to do the work for them.
As you have talked through these questions, I've written down one word on my pad, which is governance. And it
Mm,
seems to me that that's the big question, isn't it, that's still out there, is
hmm
leaders being ready to establish the
mm,
right governance,
mm,
both in terms of the first question about, should everybody have a license for everything? Well, that's fine, but what are they doing with it,
yeah.
and how do we make sure they're working on things that are really important to us?
Mm,
Through to the, will my people become dependent on it? Well, it's the same again, isn't it? If we're
hmm
not governing it, if we're not looking after it, and if we're not managing it effectively, and setting clear guidelines and expectations, then yes, of course, that
mm,
there's all of these kinds of risks. So
mm.
I wonder what your advice would be to leaders about that governance question.
It's two things I would say. The first one is be proactive in taking the leadership role. One of the things, so we cover governance on AI for leaders as a course, and um, something that's unfortunately been true in almost every single workshop we've delivered, whether it's been within a client and it's filled with their own leadership team, or whether it's many leaders from different organizations. The same thing always happens, which is when we ask the question around governance and who leads this in your organization, Pretty much always the answer is, oh, we haven't decided yet. No one's decided yet. So my first piece of advice is, if you're listening to this, if you're interested, if no one else is putting their hand up, it means you know more than everyone else already.
Mm,
So don't let that fear of not knowing a lot stop you from putting yourself in that position. Go talk to someone in the organization and ask to hold that ball. Um, Once you have it, then second piece of advice and where the concern begins. Start by finding those who are enthusiastic in the organization and just start helping them publicly share their wins and embed that new best practice.
mm.
And then again, if you're a leader and you think, well, I don't know much about it, you don't need to. You're just hooking people up. That's the role of the leader. You're creating the environment, the culture, the relationships, the conversations.
And that whole piece around this is all about improving the work, isn't it? So that
Absolutely.
practitioner role in leading improvements, in feeding back, in sharing best practice and sharing success is absolutely key, isn't it?
Mm. And one caution, if this is attempted with a ruthless ambition to find work that can be taken away in efficiency, it can lead to unintended consequences. It can lead to poor automation practice. So that would be the caution that goes with the advice is, again, really must be done with a spirit of growth and doing more with what we've got.
Yeah, fantastic. Great advice. And thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.